one of your parents was going to walk into the house and you didn't know how that was going to go. There were times when we would have to leave the house in the middle of the night.
You wrote, in 2005, I overcame my lifelong battle with depression and anxiety, and also shed the extra 30 pounds that I'd put on when going through this experience. Are you able to just maybe speak a little bit about depression and suffering from it like lifelong? Like that sounds quite hectic as a youngster being depressed.
Yeah, I think for a long time I didn't know that I was, or I didn't know that I had anxiety. I remember always complaining to my mom about stomach aches. And I didn't really even have an idea of what it even was. But as an adult now, looking back, it was just constant anxiety. I had a pretty traumatic childhood. I grew up with an alcoholic father who, it's funny, I was having a conversation yesterday with somebody and they were like, "Yeah, I think my parents are alcoholics too." And I was like, you don't get it. Like my father was not a functioning alcoholic. Like he couldn't hold down a job. He was like in and out of rehab, was also physically abusive to my mother. So as like a young girl growing up in a household where one of your parents was going to walk into the house and you didn't know how that was going to go. You didn't know the state they were going to be in. So I was constantly living in a state of anxiety, whether I knew it or not. And it served me in a lot of ways as an adult because I'm hyper aware of everything going on around me. So I'm a very empathetic person. I can like see if somebody's feeling off. I have this sense of really being tuned in to a lot of things, which is beautiful in a lot of ways, but it also doesn't serve me in a lot of ways too. And I've worked through a lot of that as an adult. But yeah, I grew up in a household where there was a lot of violence, not towards me, but towards my mother. And it was a very chaotic environment growing up. And I look back on, there was a lot of things where I was like, yeah, okay, this is just like how I was living. But now as an adult, I feel so deeply for this like young girl who was like growing up this way. There were times when we would have to leave the house in the middle of the night and we didn't live in a we I grew up in Connecticut, and people who think about Connecticut think it's like a beautiful, a very rich place, but there's towns and cities in Connecticut that are not rich at all and very poor. And so we grew up in Bridgeport, which is like not a very nice place. A lot of areas in Bridgeport are not nice. And we would have to walk to my grandmother's house in the middle of the night, me and my sister and my mom, in order to like get us to a safe place. So all that to say, I had a lot of trauma that I didn't work through. And growing up, high school, college, moving away, I moved to New York to go to college after high school. And I think I used food and a lot of other distractions to basically push down a lot of these feelings that I was experiencing and a lot of trauma. And that showed up in my relationships, that showed up in my work, that showed up in like my schoolwork and in all areas of my life. And until I could really face that and say, wow, this is like something I really need to work through. And I'm still continuing to work through. I think like it never really ends. Like we have constant things to work through. Yeah, until I was like really able to be like, wow, okay, I have a lot of anxiety, have a lot of depression. And I started to use food to cope with that, which then just leads to a very dysregulated relationship with yourself and with food. And that comes with a ton of health issues as well.